Hello, everyone. Seeing what you all are seeing. Excellent. It is 5:35, and this is a regular meeting of the Winter Hill Civic Advisory Committee. We have, just to run through a quick attendance, just so everyone knows who's in the room in terms of members of the committee tonight. I'm just going to run down the list if folks can just say hello. I know we just did a test. And Nick, who is currently listed as Tom, it looks like he'll be back in a second. So just to run down this list real quick. So we have Edith, you're here, correct?
Hello, yep.
Perfect. Councillor Klingon.
Present.
Michelle Thompson.
Present.
Perfect. Risika Dewan, am I pronouncing your name correctly at all?
It's fine, but yeah, I'm here.
All right. And Will Cullen, also probably wrong.
No, that's, you nailed it.
Okay. All right, excellent. So for folks who are in the audience tonight, I see we have a few, just in case you haven't used GoToMeeting in a little while, I'll just pull this up for a moment. Especially as we get into public comment periods at the beginning and end, there's two ways to reach out. One is to click on the raise hand button, and the other is to type a question into the questions box, and we will check in on that. This is our agenda for this evening. We have just a few items, approval of the meeting summary from last time, public comment, talking about the Winter Hill Urban Renewal Plan and going through that a little bit in preparation for the letter to the SRA. Mark Development and Beacon Communities are here to provide some project updates. And then we'll do some public comment again at the end in case we missed anything or folks want to comment on what they heard in the course of the meeting. So with that, are there any thoughts or comments related to the meeting summary we sent out? Okay, hearing none. Should I take that as everyone is in agreement that we should go ahead and post it?
Yes.
I'm seeing some nodding and some yeses. Okay.
Yes.
Speak now. Excellent. Okay, so we will get that updated to take the draft off and everything and get that posted up on the website shortly. Next up is public comment period. We do want to give a chance for folks who are in attendance. If you'd like to say something at the start of tonight, we reserve a few minutes at the beginning. And again, at the end, if you want to save until then or speak both times, that's quite all right as well. Is there anyone who'd like to speak or post a note in the chat? And again, I would recommend using the questions format for that. Nick, do you see anything? And can you hear us?
I can hear you, and I don't see anything in the questions, comments.
All right, then we will come back to folks at the end again as well for anything else that comes up. So the first thing I wanted to make sure we took some time for is to talk through the Winter Hill Urban Renewal Plan itself, just because it's a fairly dense document, and make sure that you all have a chance to ask questions about it and how it relates to, so that you, as we put together this letter that's coming from you, as you all put together this letter to the SRA about how this project relates to it, you have a good sense of what's in the plan as a starting point, and we're all starting with the same position. So what I wanted to start with is just, this is the outline of it, and then I can pull it up and we can sort of do a walkthrough of the document itself. And there we go. Now I can see all of you at the same time. So with this, it's quite a dense document. It's over 100 pages long when you add up all of the appendices. I tried to put a key together here of what are the sections that are most content related that we can use, that will make sense in terms of using in this letter to talk about sort of how does this project relate. And so those are the ones highlighted here in the dark bold text. Then, just so you all have a sense of how this is structured, an urban renewal plan has a very strict has a structure that's really based on what the state is looking for. The urban renewal plan is an application to the state to allow a community to use to basically get approval you have to get the urban renewal plan approved in order to use the powers of eminent domain that go along with urban renewal. So a lot of this is structured in terms of being able to give the state offices that review these the background of how we got to this decision. So what process did the city use to get to this point? And sorry, I'm in a lot of shadow with the sun at the moment. What is the background in terms of how we got to this decision? What is the background of this site and its condition? And then in addition to all sort of that background piece, it's also the looking forward. So if they were to approve this plan, what is our process going to look like? How would the SRA implement it? What would our engagement look like going forward? So you see all the things in italicized kind of grayed out text. Those are the background sections. What's been going on in the area, what does the site look like, and everything in green is that forward-looking piece. So right at the moment, we're sort of in a slightly different position because the project that we're considering did not go through the official SRA process, right? We haven't taken that step yet. This is a private project instead. And so what we're looking at is sort of how does it relate to the content, substantive pieces, but recognize also, I want to just recognize for all of you that there's a lot here that when we get into conversations around the corner, or if for some reason this project were not to go forward, there's a lot of sections about what the process officially is going through the SRA. Is that making sense? Okay, so I'm going to see if I can, perfect. I'm going to see if I can share my screen so you all can see the document. I highlighted some of the key sections so we can take a look at it together. Show. Sorry, multiple screens, so it's a little bit confused.
Rachel, sorry, it says the attendees are still on hold for the broadcast. Is that something that we need to change? At least on my side, it does. I'm not sure if that means folks are unable to hear us or what.
All right, I'm gonna just do one thing. We have the market development team here in the audience, and they're gonna be presenting next. And it says, we have a note from one of them that says attendees can hear just fine. Thank you so much, Josh. Okay. So can you all see, let's see if I can, so yeah, so you all should be able to see the plan up right here. Excellent. If this needs to be made bigger, and I will say this also for our attendees, I'm going to zoom in a bit as we get to actual text because this is a little small. One of the few features that is great about GoToWebinar, and I promise there are not that many, is that you can individually change the zoom. So at the top of your screen, you should have an option for zooming in and out on the content that we are sharing. So just again, this is that table of contents that we were just looking at. We're going to just talk through the sections that are most relevant, again, content-wise of the plan, goals and objectives and things like that. So it starts with an executive summary, goes through project background, and I'll zoom in as we get to important text. So let's do that here. So the executive summary goes over what the project objectives are. And I've just highlighted the top line of each of these. And again, if you end up finding you can't zoom in enough to see this, speak up and we will zoom in further. So first one is improve Winter Hill's identity as a neighborhood-oriented Main Street and commercial district. Create more green and open gathering space to support community life and the environment. Ensure a pedestrian and bike-friendly experience. Minimize displacement by building additional affordable housing. And I missed this one. Pursue redevelopment that it produces equitable outcomes for the neighborhood. Redevelop vacant and underutilized properties into uses that better meet community needs. So those are the sort of top line objectives that are laid out in this plan. I can pause here for a moment if folks want to absorb. Actually, while I do that, I will drop in the chat the link to where to find this for those who might want to look at it more in depth or sort of follow along separately on a different screen. This is the approved plan that is on the website, is what we are going through. And again, I will put that in the chat so that everyone has access to it. And is also on the agenda if you are looking for it, and it's on the right-hand column under, if you are on the project website, under plans and reports is where it can be found. So those are our top line objectives that are listed here. I'm going to just sort of scroll through a little bit kind of quickly, and then we can always come back and dig into something if there are questions. The project lays out implementation timelines for 4 different areas. There's the 2 lots at the back of the site, one being the idea at the time, and this is going to make much more sense as we actually get to the next section. So I'm going to come back to this because right now this is a little illogical. We've not looked at an actual layout of these locations yet. But there's a section, the second section goes through all of a whole series of maps about the site. So starting with this one, Broadway is here running sort of at an angle near the bottom of the screen. Star Market, it has the black roof, and the white roof is Walgreens, just for some orientation. A lot of this is probably going to be familiar because we've looked at a lot of maps of the site in the past, but this is the site area that is included in the urban renewal plan. And it does include the 2 corner pieces. Again, those are not part of the project that's being considered right now, but that is part of the area that you all are advising on.
Rachel, I have a quick question about this map, just for clarity.
Sure.
Could you explain what the thin black lines going through the site are?
Yeah, those are the current property boundaries. So there are actually multiple parcels that are part of the Star Market Walgreens holding.
Got it. Okay.
There's a map that shows that a little better coming up as well.
Thank you.
This map is going to be really familiar for most of you because you all live and work in the area. Just the location relative to the News T station, Foss Park, etc. The broader Winter Hill neighborhood, how that relates to 10 Hills and East Somerville, etc. And then this is zooming in. So this is a little clearer as to where those lines, those are the individual property boundaries that exist today, and the sort of tax ID numbers on the parcels. And then this is the proposed that's in the urban renewal plan. So the urban renewal plan calls for combining the 2 corner parcels into the rest, and then breaking off the 2 at the back. So breaking off this one and this little piece at the end. Those are those parking lots that we saw on the when we did the walk around. Existing buildings on the site, existing zoning. This has been updated a little bit with this project that we've been looking at. But at the time, it was MR5 across the front, so height of 5 stories, MR3 in the middle, 3-story height, and neighborhood residence behind. That again has changed a little bit as part of how this project has been evolving. Also, we've talked about this a little bit, that there's a pedestrian street designation, and that affects on the ground floor what the business types are allowed. It also is an indication that these are areas that the city doesn't want to see curb cuts. I think this is probably the one of the more useful maps showing how the city intended it, and it's helpful to rotate. I'm seeing Will's head go sideways. There we go, with north up now. What's proposed here is that everything on the front of the property be a mixed use redevelopment. Then that the piece sort of on that Sewell Street parcel that's closer to Temple Street becoming an open space. And that the second one that's closer to Grant becoming a residential house lot. And so this is what's called for as the sort of broad strokes of what should be redeveloped in the plan. Let's see, let's keep going through these maps in case. There's a map just showing the sewer connections in the area, the streetscape work that had been done in the past. Again, a lot of this is background information for the state folks who are reviewing this plan. This one is also, I think, quite relevant to the work. The other thing that's called for in addition to that breakup of the 3 was the idea that there should be some sort of crossing for pedestrians and cyclists through the center of the site. And that's also has been part of the plan since it was adopted. Again, these are just parcel boundaries, proposed parcel boundaries at the end of the project. Buildings to be demolished. There are no buildings that are proposed to be rehabilitated, so this one is really kind of blank. And then this was the map of buildings that was shown to the state as that basis. So you see sort of a courtyard structure over here and some big plaza through and a set of buildings. And remember, this includes the corner. Let me go back. These next sections, I'm going to just sort of click through really quickly, and apologies if it's too fast, but this is background information on sort of the history of Winter Hill, the demographics, what was Winter Hill like when it was the thriving, neighborhood center with movie theater and everything back in the day. What does it look like today? What the planning history here has been. I think some of these photos are really interesting and helpful, right? This is what it looked like when there used to be a movie theater on the site. At one point, there was a project a few years ago to try and develop, do something active with those parking lots down at the back. It sort of was been part of the idea, percolation in the area, what this site could be. A little bit about the history of the other buildings in the site, heat, all that kind of stuff. An important part, just again, I'm trying to lay out some context and we'll try and go through this quickly, but an important part of the process in determining an urban renewal plan is to talk about the findings of decadence, that this is a site that needs to be rehabilitated, that it is becoming a nuisance property. So there's a whole section that covers that, all about the deterioration and quality of the buildings that are on the property. Some really detailed assessments of each individual site. One of the things that's laid out, and this is also the challenge for private development, and what had been happening over the course of the 10 years was that the corner was seeming critical. Since the site was abandoned, one of the things that's been coming up is that the corner would seem to be really critical to being able to redevelop the majority of the site. And that's where it's sort of been really interesting throughout this process that the corner has been able to stay separate, and part of why we're going to have that conversation at a later date. But that was one of the challenges that was identified when this plan was published. And again, this plan was published 2020, or sorry, 2021. It was published 2021, mostly written in 2019, 2020. Here is where we get into those objectives again. So I want to this is where I think we want to focus our time, are the objectives and the goals of the plan. So laying out those objectives again, improving the neighborhood street, making it a main street, green and open space, pedestrian and bike friendly, minimizing displacement with affordable housing, and redeveloping vacant and underutilized parcels. What's helpful here, and what I tried to do is take a moment to just go through and highlight in each of these categories of objectives, there's a layout of strategies about how this could be, how we can make progress towards the objective. Many of these strategies relate directly to redevelopment of the properties. There are a few though that don't, right? And so you'll see this in like the very first strategy here is incentivize a business association. That is not specific to redeveloping the properties. That's a broader goal for improving the Main Street experience in the area. But I did want to I highlighted the ones that are like very clearly tied. I want to just sort of like point you all to them. And at the end of tonight's meeting, I can send this note with all of these highlights for folks to take a look at if it will help get the ideas going. And feel free to stop me if you see anything or you have questions as we go through this. But sort of did the same process with each category. Right, so things like under green and open space, it says ensure that public green spaces are visible and welcoming to the community and visitors. Privately owned public space should be designed so it's as obviously available to the use of all as possible. Reducing curb cuts, including bike storage, under pedestrian and bike friendly, under affordable housing, those all are very tied to the redevelopment. So things like, including affordable housing as required. We're at 20% required. There is the second bullet here, I think is an interesting one with Beacon Communities now being part of this team because it says explore opportunities to work with mission-driven affordable housing developers. And then the third one is about seeing about multiple bedrooms, which I think a couple folks on this group have brought up a few different times. I think Michelle, you were one who has brought that up. And then just continuing scrolling through this, but equitable outcomes. A lot of this is about community engagement and making sure that there's robust opportunities for the community to engage with the development team. So I think one of the things that's been really exciting is that we've been able to have these conversations directly with the development team. That's, we're not going through the official process at the moment, but these are the things that we were all looking for, was to have these robust conversations. And then I have one here highlighted in pink, and that is that this is a down the line thing, but one of the things that I just wanted to point out for everyone, because we will have to come back to this, is that the CAC has a role in helping think about monitoring and evaluating implementation down the line. So something that we can come back to when we get further into the process. Under the section about redevelopment of the vacant and underutilized sites, the key strategies include, subsurface infrastructure, things like stormwater management, and then working with the SRA and the redevelopment partner to, continue to think about community needs as the project develops. The other thing that I think is helpful here is this next section, which really covers sort of some concrete goals. So the concrete goals that are listed here are to provide at least 40 net new jobs and at least 200 units of new housing with minimum of 40 affordable units. I believe, and the team from Mark Development Beacon Communities can correct us, I believe certainly in the housing we are above that number, and same with the affordable. I think the new jobs, is probably also on target. The estimate is that the corner properties have 30 net, about approximately 30 jobs affiliated with the businesses there. Then the next one is to create about a half acre of publicly accessible green open space and ensure 25% is permeable surfaces. Again, the pink and green are sort of more targeted to CAC operations as we move further into things, and just sort of keeping an eye. They're less specific to this, but things like as we're monitoring, how are we, continuing to do engagement as the next stages move forward, and then the ones in green are more about that monitoring side, even more, what's happening with, as things move into implementation, what does this look like in terms of rental prices, and where are we in terms of how the businesses in the surrounding community are doing. And then the last one here is preserving the pharmacy use in the area, which they've talked about as the Walgreens basically being able to move back to their other location, which is quite successful for them. Or for Walgreens, I should say. I should be specific. Any questions on these? This is sort of the crux of this. Is this all sounding? Are folks following? Questions?
I do have a couple of questions. One is just I'm curious as to whether there's a definition for purposes of this of the word underutilized, and I see that being used a lot, and it'd be helpful to have a clear idea of exactly what that means.
Yeah, I will. Let me take a look. I'll open it up in a second set and see if I can take a look if there's a specific definition. I believe it's sort of part of the there are these it's coming from the state definitions of how this rolls. But Councilor Klingon, you were part of this, and I think, was that you chiming in?
Oh, no, I was just going to say that I'm following along, and yeah, I don't, as far as underutilized, I don't know in which the exact way it's being, as far as the definition goes of it being used here, but I mean, I could make a guess at it anyway.
Sure. Yeah. Of course, we can guess at the definition of the word underutilized, but I think it's particularly relevant when it comes to the corner properties, since as we are discussing sort of what may come of that portion of this area, I think that's just an important topic. More, I would say, more important than as it pertains to the rest of the area, which is not going through any process of eminent domain at least at this time.
Oh no, I would definitely agree. I just Rachel, like, was there a response from the state with regards to the specifics around like the description of each parcel being described as under, like, what did anything come up about that, about the underutilization of the corner pieces? Is that in the notes?
There wasn't, I can take a look back at Lauren's notes. When I joined, this was already through most of the process, but I was here for when the state came down with their response, and they didn't send anything back specific. They did approve the plan really much faster than we expected, actually, and with much less dialogue than we anticipated. I think a lot of it comes down to the description in the plan is really that the corner had, up until this point, been the linchpin that was causing challenges for the ability to develop the bigger piece. I think this is the first team that we've seen that hasn't needed it to come up with a strategy that could work.
Okay.
But we can, I think, especially as we come back to that topic in the spring, to dig into that a little bit further. And I can reach out to the state and see if they do have a perspective on that as well.
Thanks.
Any other thoughts on these goals and objectives before we kind of breeze through the rest? All right, hearing none, I'm going to just kind of skim through the rest and I'll sort of zoom out a bit so we can just kind of buzz through as we get to it. But a lot of this, again, is really that background material and then what happens if we were going through the SRA process. So it lays out, all these details, like what are the sites that we are going to be acquiring or the SRA will be acquiring? What is the relocation plan? Like what's the basics of how we would tackle relocation? Again, this is much more relevant to the corner. With where we are at the moment, Walgreens does have a relocation plan as part of the proposal that we have, and that's the only active business that's displaced in the current proposal. And there is a plan for them. But if we were to get into the corner, there are rights that all the tenants have, residential and business alike, to get relocation benefits if they do need to be relocated. So there's a preliminary plan. If we were going through that process, we would do a much more detailed plan as well. So these are, who is eligible for relocation benefits. Again, with this private process, the Walgreens piece is baked in. How we assemble the site. What are there's a whole section here on public improvements that have happened in the areas. This is for just documenting what the city and state have been investing in and around the area. So the fact that Foss Park is a state park, all of the new, what's happening in terms of new community space in the area, transportation investments, in the bus lane opening, the bus bike lanes opening a couple years ago. The proposal then of how we would actually dispose of the property. So at the time, what was proposed is that the piece at the back, how this was originally proposed is that the city would acquire everything, or the SRA would acquire everything, reconstitute it as these 3 lots, and then split them off. Again, we're sort of jumping in at the middle with the proposal that's at hand. But the idea was that that would be split off and the city would handle the park development here. This piece would be handed off to a mission-driven affordable housing developer. And then the front would be the main piece that would go to a mixed-use developer, like the proposal we're seeing. There is a section that talks about sort of at a baseline what would be expected if a developer was going through the process with the SRA. So what would they, if we were in that process with the SRA and selecting a development partner, what are some of the key things that we would want to evaluate them on? What in basic documents that they would need to provide. This is where it goes through timeline of how it would all come together. Again, we're jumping in the middle because we have a lot of proposal that's not going through this acquisition process. But again, the CAC, you'll see you all up right at the top there. Some of the short-term actions is to get you all set up as a group to really be able to weigh in on all of these conversations and to help think about engagement strategies as we're moving forward with all these different elements, like we've been talking about with the survey and things like that. There are some ongoing tasks, and I highlighted this in pink. This is a list of those other things that we need to sort of have in mind in terms of implementing this that aren't specific to relocation, right? So working with the businesses to see if there's an interest in doing a business improvement district or a Main Streets kind of organization for Winter Hill. Thinking about monitoring rents around the area, pushing for those local services, things like that, so we can make sure it stays that vibrant Main Street that everyone wants. There's details of the financial plan of if, you know, this is documentation for the state, like what would our financial plan look like if we were acquiring all this property, how we might fund all of that, different strategies. And then just so that this is
Rachel.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this obviously doesn't get amended necessarily, but I would imagine the financials change some with the finding of the asbestos or whatever pollutants are there.
Yeah, absolutely. These are very preliminary numbers, but there is sort of like, you'll see appraisals on there. Appraisals is one of the first steps if we were acquiring the properties, is to really get an update on where things are in terms of value of the land.
Okay.
Yeah, that's one of the things that we would have to look at. I did just want to note this section just so in case anyone is curious, if you weren't involved in those earlier steps, there's a whole documentation starting on page 84 that's about all the community involvement that went into this decision to use this plan and set up this process. And just so you all know that it's there. But again, the meetings really went from, you know, December 2019 through to March 2020. So Councilor Kling, it looks like you hosted a meeting just before everything shut down as the last event here.
Yeah.
And so that's where how we end up at picking, you know, this site. One of the conversations that was being had at that time was the possibility of using urban renewal and this plan to cover multiple sites in the neighborhood. So looking potentially at the site where the Walgreens was moving back to, but noting that that was also at the time had been vacant for some time. Also looking at, you know, could there be use of these tools to, you know, streamline the layout of parking and streets behind the brewery, things like that. So there were a few different sites that were considered. In the process of this community engagement, it was landed on that this was going to be the one site that was focused on. So I just wanted to make this sort of make folks aware of it if you haven't had a chance to dig into what had happened in the past. Similarly, there's sort of like on the qualitative side, like what were folks looking for back then, which I think are helpful as we're evaluating this proposal. And you all are putting together your notes. Things that were being discussed back then were sort of scale, the importance of independent and minority-owned businesses. We've been talking a lot about the retail strategy here, importance of Walgreens and some fresh produce coming in. What's noted here, I did read through these sections. The height, use, and design of the redevelopment, that was really not discussed in that process, but it was noted throughout that, like, yes, there needs to be detailed conversations about that. It was noted that if the SRA took the property, the community benefits and uses should be really highly prioritized. And of course, throughout, one of the big things we've heard is the importance of there being lots of community engagement and opportunities for the public to engage with the development team. And then, of course, this is where the Civic Advisory Committee is born as a concept and the role that you all are playing in this process. And then that's really it. The rest of this is pretty background stuff. You know, their environmental certificates, the environmental like process review pieces that we had to go through to get this on the list with the state. There's an equity analysis that was written up if anyone's curious to take a look back at that. Again, importance of civic advisory committee in sort of this accountability and communication strategy, and the importance of it was placed on this group existing to streamline a location for folks to come and speak up about what they're thinking about with this project, details on that relocation plan again, the other plans that had happened, and then documentation of the votes. And that brings us to the end. It's a lot of material there. Anything I should go back to that you'd like to take a look at in terms of text? Again, I can send this along just so you can all have the highlights that I pulled out as we start to think about what this letter looks like. And I'm curious, and I'm going to go back to sharing the screen so I can show you all my notes. Let's see if I just, but are there any comments or thoughts that I should record in terms of, reactions or things that you would definitely want to include in the letter at this point in time? Ideas on how we structure this.
Sorry.
But
Just a quick question. Are there examples of letters that we can reference as well?
ooh, good question. I will take a look. I don't know that other communities have this structure. I think this was invented. I think this may have been a Somerville invention for this project.
Got it.
We're trailblazing.
But my gut was that taking those objective statements and putting them all in one list, and then sort of having that as a starting point for you all to sort of add comments to, might be a good place to start.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm just gonna make a note of that. So we can start with that. What our goal, I think, is that Nick and I will work on putting a draft together for your meeting, for the next meeting, so that we can spend some time at the next meeting talking it through and reviewing what the text is, because it should come from your voice. So I want to make sure you all have a chance to really give input exactly on what it should say. We can start with a draft.
On the topic of the objective of a green and open space to support community life and the environment, one thing that I would love to emphasize based on the last public meeting that we had was the strong support voiced by several attendees and members of the community for the developers to pursue any and all, really as many as possible opportunities to take environmental design into account and to prioritize that as such, including a green roof, solar opportunities, passive house, and other opportunities. And one point that I thought was really pertinent on that topic was the recommendation to work with the Urban Forestry Commission. So pursuing a partnership with established city offices to help with that objective.
Great. Yeah, any other initial thoughts that you want us to include in this first draft? And we do have the Beacon Communities and the Mark Development Beacon Communities team here too. So we can turn to that also and come back to this if you all think that would be helpful to hear from, to have a dialogue with them first and then come back to this list. But anything you want, we can make a note of first before we get there too. I'll just check in with our folks here being over. Ursika, Michelle, anything coming to mind?
No, nothing as of now.
Michelle, anything on your end we should make note of?
Yeah.
All right. So I think then, unless Will, Edith, anything, Counselor, anything else we should add before we move to the next piece and then come back to this?
No, I'm good for now.
At the risk of talking too much, I suppose one more thing that is on my mind as we went through that document and we're discussing the concept of minimizing displacement as much as possible, as well as providing equitable outcomes for all the communities involved in this neighborhood. It does feel somewhat at odds with the concept of, let me rephrase. Displacing the businesses and residences on the corner does strike me as at odds with the objectives, when most of those businesses and residents, as far as I understand, are of many different nationalities and backgrounds and represent a diverse portion of our community. So without signaling, a preference one way or the other for the outcome, I would say that it's something worth acknowledging, in my opinion, and treading lightly, as it is. It's an issue that could slow down this development potentially. I think a lot of the issues have been mitigated, at least in part, by the design work that's been done by the developers, which I really appreciate. But I do think that it's worth mentioning in the context of this letter that merits a bit of caution in how it's approached.
The corner itself.
Yeah, specifically of displacement of businesses and homes on the corner.
Well put. I'm glad you mentioned.
Thank you.
Do you all think it is a positive that this project at the moment is not inclusive of the corner?
I don't understand what you're saying when you say that. Can you?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think what was anticipated when this was written back in 2019, 2020 was that there would be no way to do redevelopment of the rest without the corner. This is the first time that that's come up. And I'm curious if, given what you all are saying, that you think it should be taken that's the more sensitive site. Is it a good thing that this project doesn't include that?
So Rachel, I can just speak to the process in terms of, whether or not, what my opinion may or may not be is different than, if you look at those red dots with the community stated, knowing full well what it meant to do a renewal plan at this site, they were, overwhelmingly supported just the right up to the corner. Again, we're in a different place now in terms of the developer that isn't taking that, and I can tell you from my personal standpoint is that I've never been super comfortable with taking those businesses, as a resident and just as a person who, as a person who just doesn't really. I understand like a lot of people's sort of feelings towards the aesthetics. I mean, Craig's not helping himself with those bars on the windows and everything else, but ultimately, if it can be done without the corner, that would be my preference. But I also wouldn't necessarily stand in the way of the community's wishes, mainly because I've talked to the people in those places, and you know, there's conversations to be had if we ever get to that point, I think.
To your question, Rachel, of do we think it is a good thing that that the development plan currently doesn't take the corner into account? I would say, from my perspective personally, probably yes, both because it speeds up the ability to do anything with this lot by I would imagine a substantial degree, and leaves options for the future. I would agree with Councillor Kling, and I think purely from an aesthetic perspective, I think many people would agree that the corner could be more aesthetically pleasing, but that shouldn't be the fulcrum by which we move to displace anybody. So again, I'll voice appreciation for the developers taking all those factors into account and presenting an option where we can move forward regardless of what happens.
I mean, it's not a tough thing to, it's a tough thing to answer, Rachel, for anybody in this group, basically deciding whether or not those things stay or go. So, I mean, I can understand why people would be hesitant to, I was actually pretty surprised during the process how cavalier people were with the eminent domain and how, you know, they were actually like, why haven't you done this sooner? Like, what, you know, so, you know, there's a variety of attitudes in the community, especially with just the frustration around the entire site. But I, you know, I can understand if people don't want to comment if they don't feel comfortable.
I think then what I might add to this statement about sort of like it leaves the options open is it also leaves the option open. It leaves an opportunity for more engagement specifically around that question.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, definitely conversations to be had. You know, even with those folks, because again, I've had some conversations, and so did Lauren and others with those folks. So I don't think it's, you know, we also shouldn't assume that, you know, everybody in there, you know, like again, there's conversations I think that that can be had as a community when we get to that point, if and when we get to that point.
Okay, I feel like that might be a good pause point. If you all agree to sort of switch gears, and we have about half an hour left, so I want to make sure there is some time to talk with the community, with March Bell and Beacon communities, and also for more public comment at the end. I do want to note we had 2 folks who responded to the note about involving the other committee, so I just want to read those while they're relevant. Just to put them in for the record. So we have a member listening in from the Urban Forestry Commission. Let's see if I can make this bigger. So that they would like to hear, Urban Forestry Committee would like to be able to make recommendations around plant selection and plant communities, and the energy use and climate change committees would also like to be able to talk directly with the development team. And I'm so sorry, I'm in deep shadow in the office at the moment. And so we can pass those. I just want to put a note out to the folks who sent those in, so we appreciate the comments. And I will also pass those along. The development team is listening tonight, and also to our permitting colleagues as well, so that they are aware that the committees are interested in having those conversations. So with that, I'm going to invite the team to be panelists now. So folks, give me one moment. I will make you a panelist so you can turn on your cameras and speak. So I've got Robert, I've got Adam Dash. I know, and Damien. And Robert, do you know who from the team is going to be sharing screen?
Can you hear me, Rachel?
Yes.
Yeah, that's going to be Adam Benjamin.
All right, so Adam, I'm going to make you a presenter.
And Rachel, this is Damien. Can you hear me as well? Can you add Jeff Geisinger to the group from UTL? He'll be handling the sustainability topics
Perfect.
tonight. Thank you.
Excellent. That is well on theme with the question we'll
I
put
know.
in.
Damien stole my thunder on the opening.
Rare that happens.
All right, so we can see, I think, Adam, we can see your screen.
You guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that. Can you see a PDF that says 299 Broadway? No.
No, we're seeing your folder at the moment.
Oh, okay. Let me.
I feel like I'm in some noir movie. Jeez.
That better?
Not quite.
Okay.
You are no longer screen sharing.
Now we're
There it is.
there.
All right, there we go.
There we go. Okay. Thank you.
All right, so I'll open up. First, I want to say happy to be here, meeting with everybody again. I always enjoy these conversations. I find them very productive, and thought your perusal through the urban renewal plan was very educational. I want to applaud Will on raising the topic of the sensitivity of the corner piece. And I've mentioned this before, but I'd like to reiterate it in the context of everything Will said, is we definitely appreciate that sensitivity. And when analyzing this project ourselves, there were two things going through my mind, at least at the time, in terms of inclusion of the corner piece or not. First and foremost, I think you hit it head on, Will, with the expediency factor. Because we were able to privately contract with Cohen, to buy the main piece, we really felt it was important to see if we could get comfortable with a project that was non-inclusive of the corner piece. And I do think we've succeeded very much so, but it was also important for us in considering that, what we're doing doesn't foreclose the addition of that in the future. So I think it's kind of set up really nicely here, where a development such as the one we're proposing could move forward without that corner piece, and I believe be very successful and a true benefit to the community, without foreclosing the ability, if the end result doesn't meet the satisfaction of the community, to then take another look at the corner piece. So, I just wanted to mention that before we got into the presentation, because I think it's a very relevant consideration. And thanks for bringing that up, Will. So tonight we're going to hit on two topics. First is sustainability, which is essentially the energy efficiency of our building. And secondly, we're going to touch again on the parking study that we've done in the neighborhood and the results of that study. I can't recall if we have shown those results yet to the group, but we'll put them up again very briefly, and we'd like to continue the conversation because we feel it's very important to at least garner your support in our effort to at least be able to get, on-street parking permits for a certain portion of our tenancy, percentage of our tenancy. So I'm going to turn it over to Damien first to, I'm sorry, I got that backwards. I'm going to turn it over to, I guess, Jeff Geisinger from UTIL to take us through sustainability, and then Damien will follow up with the parking analysis. Thank you. Jeff?
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Thanks. And yeah, so thanks so much for, for having us, echoing Robert's comments. I was really pleased to hear the theme of sustainability come up, kind of building on some of the comments that came out in the last CAC meeting. I wanted to sort of touch on at a high level our overall sustainability approach for this project. We're proposing a, kind of a comprehensive sustainability strategy that looks both at the kinds of how we can create a kind of healthy and sustainable environment, both outwardly towards the community and inwardly towards the residents and visitors to the buildings. The cornerstone of this is really leading into a kind of net zero ready and carbon neutral ready approach. We know how how critical the climate crisis is, how important Somerville's climate action plan and carbon neutrality goals are, and how much buildings contribute to this. So, we're proposing to target passive house certification for both buildings, recognizing that, the passive house design standard is really, it's really the best building standard to achieve a low load, energy efficient, net zero ready building that will really serve as a kind of benchmark for the clean energy transition, around Somerville and the state. So don't want to get into a lot of the details, but on the upper left of this slide, we're highlighting, not only the way that this standard will position the project to be ready for, clean energy transition and carbon, have the lowest carbon emissions possible, but there's a lot of other co-benefits that this standard will bring to the project, including, incredible thermal comfort, great indoor air quality, making sure that through layers of quality assurance through the passive house certification process that the built product is performing as designed. Operational costs will be driven down for both owners and residents. The acoustic environment will be improved, and the buildings will be more resilient in the face of kind of heat events or loss of power. This diagram sort of shows not only the kind of building strategies that are associated with this passive house approach, but also site strategies that include, making a connection to the public spaces that are going to be resilient to, flooding and heat effects through shaded outdoor spaces, permeable surfaces, and providing spaces for ecosystem services. So, we're really excited to bring this approach to the table and to continue to work with you all, including, the Commission on Energy and Climate Change and Urban Forestry, in kind of really crafting and, enhancing our approach here to sustainability.
Great.
To answer any questions as well.
All right, thanks, Jeff. Damien, you want to take on the next section,
Sure.
please?
Happy to jump on it. Adam, if you can flip to the next slide. So as Robert alluded to, parking is really a critical part of this project and something we were anxious to get back in front of you and speak to further. By way of update, or for those of you who were not with us at the last meeting, we did conduct a study, and in discussions with the city, we looked at on-street parking availability within two radiuses, as you can see here, one of which is a 5-minute walk shed. The second is a 10-minute walk shed from the site, which, as you can see, is highlighted in blue here. Next slide. So this is a graph that was actually presented at our last meeting. And as you can see, this references that 5-minute walk shed that I referenced on the last slide. The amount of on-street parkings in that 5-minute walk shed were just under 1,800 spaces. And so what we did is we conducted 4 in the field studies, 1 on a weekday, 2 weeknights, 1 on a Saturday, and then we averaged it out. And as you can see, starting from left to right, the weekday period, we have approximately 950 spaces or a 53% vacancy in that 1,800 parking count. That window starts to shrink closer to 25% when we looked at 2 weeknight periods, and I'll give you the specific hours as we move forward. Saturday, there was a release in the pressure of the parking where you saw a vacancy just around 40%. And so on average, it was approximately 35% vacancy rate. And so this slide was presented. There were a number of questions trying to better understand the actual locations of where there was parking opportunities adjacent to the site. And so the next couple slides are going to walk you through that. So Adam, if you can blow this up for me. Great. Okay, so this, can you make it larger, Adam? Is that possible?
Oh,
All right, so hopefully everyone can see that. Okay, so this is the first window. This is the weekday period. This was conducted on May 18th from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. And what this highlights is in blue, green, and yellow, those are all areas that we identify as high availability. So in other words, the red areas are locations that have an occupancy of 90% or greater. And so we identify those areas next to the site as the spaces with limited parking availability. Everything else that is not colored in red, we identified as opportunities where we saw meaningful parking availability. And as I alluded to on the last slide, this represented roughly 53% of the total parking spaces in this walk shed. Adam, if you flip to the next slide. Okay, so this was our first weeknight study. This was conducted on Tuesday, May 25th between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m., excuse me. And again, this is where we had an availability of approximately 24%. Again, the areas in red represent the locations where 90% or more of the spaces were occupied. All of the other locations were well below that 90% area. And so that's what we tried to identify here. And again, as I'm about to show you on the next slide, we went back and checked to confirm that our numbers were consistent between weeknight periods. And Adam, if you can pull that up. This was conducted a week later on a different day, on a Wednesday, also between 10 p.m. and 1 a.m. And as you can see here, the data we collected was almost identical. In fact, it was off by 1 percentage point, or 23% of the spaces were available. Lastly, we'll jump to the Saturday data. Okay, great. So again, to remind you on what I showed you on the graph earlier, this is Saturday. This was conducted on May 21st between the hours of 10 a.m. and 1 p.m. And as you can see here, again, a very limited amount of red parking spaces, or said another way, 40% of the spaces are actually vacant relative to the site. And so we wanted the community to have the benefit of these specific areas so you could really understand where that parking is relative to the site and within the streets that you all live on. So I think, Adam, if you can just flip to the last slide, this really, again, captures all of that data you saw aggregated into one area. And so with that, I think we would welcome any questions or discussion on the topic. And thank you.
Well, that's all we have for tonight's presentation, Rachel. So we want to do some back and forth, or are we taking public comment now?
I think let's start with the members of the committee first, and we'll leave a few minutes at the end for public comment.
Okay.
Since we do have some folks in attendance tonight, especially. So any thoughts or reactions from our CAC members? And I'll take some notes as well.
I just had one question. I believe it was mentioned during the last public meeting, but could you just say one more time the total number of on-street parking permits that you're anticipating being available to new residents of these buildings?
We're requesting, consistent with the original proposal where we were able to provide on-site parking, we're proposing a 0.5 ratio to the number of units. So that's roughly 144 parking stalls or parking spots or passes that we're going to be asking for. So it's, if you look at it in that context, 144, and we take the worst period here, which has an availability of 415, one could reduce this ask to simply, 35% of what's typically available overnight is what we're asking for.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I mean, that number alone certainly quells some fears of mine. I would imagine of others to know that, the maximum addition is well within the bounds of the most constrained times. That's helpful. Thank you.
You're welcome. And Will, in the committee as a whole here, I just want to add that, the ask for this is really dictated by the capital markets, the lenders, so to speak, and they're much less risk adverse, to the developers' money. We're by nature risk takers, but the capital markets are not. So in our minds, I mean, it's sort of contradictory for me in the sense that we're really creating a real, trailblazing type of development from a transportation and sustainability standpoint here with a car-free site. I mean, we're very excited about that, but with that does come some risks that we're finding the capital markets just aren't tolerating. They want to have, in our conversations, it's an absolute requirement of theirs. So I can tell you that we're not going to be sitting there advertising the fact that there is this ability to go get on-street parking passes to our tenants. In fact, as we think through our whole TDM package that we'll get into, transportation demand management plan that I'm sure we'll get into formally when we get into, the zoning board. There are tools we can use to actually incentivize people to not even have a car and apply for those passes. So this, for me, it's all optics. And in fact, my heart and my brain say, is very against this, but I'm trying to balance that with having the ability to actually make this project a reality. So I just wanted you to understand the personal dynamic going on here in thought. Thank you.
Anyone else? Edith, any thoughts?
I guess I'm just curious to know what is like the standard for like other like properties? Like, do we in Somerville like cap some buildings to not have the ability to have parking passes?
Yeah, that is. Do you want me to?
Yeah, I mean, we're really talking about the restriction in the transit shed, within a half-mile radius. We fall, because of the new Gilman Square stop, we fall within this half-mile radius. But if you look at that map, I don't know if we have it tonight, we are like last property. We're right on the edge. So it was kind of just unlucky in that regard that we fell just inside that half-mile radius where no on-street parking passes are supposed to be available to developments. And that's why when we get to the zoning board, we're seeking a waiver, you know, from that restriction.
Got it. Thank you. And just like, I guess, a gut reaction, like living in the area and living close to Gilman Square, I'm sure like there's a lot of families who just need a car to be able to grocery shop and like pick up their kids from daycare and all that stuff. So I don't know. I hear why it like is a little bit daunting for like folks who live in the area that we might like lose some off-street parking for people who are already living here. But I can't imagine like if I had to not have my car or something.
Well, we'd like to get you out of that habit eventually.
I know.
Hey, Rachel, this is Breck from Winter Hill. Sorry I was a little bit late joining. I guess just a general comment, and this is related to you know, the work they're doing on the environmental responsibility side. I guess, you know, I'm a novice at all this. My first neighborhood committee, and certainly my first time through a process like this with a development. But you know, I appreciate the extent to which the team has taken feedback from, you know, us and others, you know, in the community to, you know, very materially work that commentary into the plan. I mean, maybe this is typical for every process like this, but I've kind of been overwhelmed and pleasantly surprised by the extent to which this group has kind of taken that feedback and, you know, concretely worked it into their proposal. So thank you.
Thank you.
So just for folks on the phone, Michelle, any thoughts?
Not right now. I'm just listening to hear what he has to say, but at this moment, no, I don't have any thoughts. I have some notes that I wrote down
Oh,
that I may
excellent.
come back with later, but for right now, no.
Thanks. Checking in also on the phone, Councilor Klingon, anything?
No, Rachel, nothing at this time. I mean, I'll just express, you know, you know, I'm still, this is not an easy, as far as what Mark Development's proposing, you know, I'm listening to people, I'm listening to folks. I do want to kind of just frame it for Edith, who asked that the city actually, what they've done is they've said, we'll allow you to not build parking if you're in this area, because a lot of times, you know, parking, like we got rid of the parking minimums. You don't have to build, which is usually, if you don't have that many units, it's not necessarily a bad thing because you can put more property on, you know, you don't have to build a driveway. with obviously with a big development like this, it's problematic. So with a big development, what we've said is like, well, with all developments, we say if you don't have to build parking, but you don't get your people aren't allowed to get stickers. So in this case, they're not building the parking, but they're asking for the waiver. It's unfortunate that we weren't able to build some parking here, and I know that Robert has said it's to the tune of $18 million or something. You know, as this process moves forward, it's going to be really, I think it's going to be challenging. I don't think people fully appreciate that. You know, I know they did the parking study, but I have reservations about this myself personally, and so yeah. So anyway, just to kind of put it in that perspective of because of the money factor with the pollution, they're choosing not to build parking.
And I'll add, Councillor Klingon, or clarify that the 18 million is incremental cost above and beyond what it would normally cost to put in the underground structure. And the 18 million is a cap, you know, or a maximum. The report we got estimated that cost at a range of, I think, 12 to 18. So we've been socializing it as a potential $18 million increased cost.
I appreciate that. And I also appreciate, again, just like everyone else has said, the way you folks have continued to listen and continue to come back. And the fact that we're looking at 48% affordable housing on the site is extremely exciting. So like I said, I'm being cautious for the folks around that area as the ward counselor. You know, I'm listening. So I'm waiting. I'm soliciting feedback from anybody. So anyway, but otherwise, you know, thanks for coming again today and just continuing to be a really great community partner.
Appreciate your comments, Councillor, and I plead with you to just think about the parking in the context of, you know, not allowing, you know, striving for perfection to be the enemy of the good. That's kind of how I look at this. Every development that we do, we honestly, you know, we take in community input and we do strive for that perfection. But oftentimes you do hit in our business, you know, extenuating circumstances like the one we have here, which preclude us from getting to that, you know, perfection standard. And that's when, you know, the rubber does meet the road, and you have to look at and weigh the overall benefit against negatives. So thank you.
Oh, believe me, no, believe me, nobody wants to see this parcel redeveloped more than I do. I just, you know, again, I have to be cautious as a representative of the folks down there. You know, hoping maybe there's going to be a creative solution where there's like off-site parking or something, but I guess we'll have to keep talking about that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. We are going to start engaging, you know, with some of the local property owners that appear to have the ability to provide overnight parking for our tenants. But I want to be cautious, and as we take on that effort, if successful, I can't imagine though that property owners will tie up their sites for the parking income in perpetuity, you know, and foreclose out the ability to have future flexibility in their own properties to redevelop. We will try, but that is a very high standard to meet. But it is quite possible we can have, you know, reach agreement with some property owners who might enjoy the extra income, and the lots are vacant now overnight. But I can't imagine they're going to tie themselves to any long-term commitment because of the flexibility. If I were a property owner, I'd be very reluctant to do so in perpetuity. But
I hear that.
We'll get back to you certainly once, maybe hopefully by next month. We'll have some input on what we've learned in that effort.
Okay, much appreciated. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
We do have a couple of folks with public comment. I want to make sure we catch any last thoughts though. So I'm going to ask Risika if you've got anything first, since you're also listening in.
No, nothing yet. I think it's interesting to think about, but yeah, nothing yet.
Okay. Any last comments from members of the committee before we allow the public a chance to speak as well? All right, I'm going to turn it over. So for members of the public, again, you can raise your hand or drop a question in the chat. And I see a question mark. Next to Tori. Tori, I'm gonna unmute you so you can speak directly. But also, I think your question just says, can the team from Mark and Beacon Community stay on? So, Tori, you have the floor.
Hi, everybody. Hi, Robert. Hi, team. Hello.
Hi, Tori.
Hi, Civic Advisory Committee. Thanks for doing this hard work. So I have a few questions. What I was wondering I forgot how many units there were, and I was hoping to get the breakdown again. And this was just like to help me think about, the amount of parking that's being proposed.
Okay, we have 200 and I think we're at 287 right now.
Yep.
Adam, do we have anything available where you could broad brush what the mix is? Or maybe if Tim Love or Jeff are on the line, they might know offhand. But we have a very generous mix towards 2 bedrooms due to the fact that Beacon with the affordable building is very much skewed towards 2 bedrooms on the affordables. Our side of the equation, we're leaning more towards, a smaller studio and 1 bedroom on the market side, because we feel the bigger need on the larger units is on the affordability side.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert.
But I can get back to you with a more specific breakdown on the mix.
Yeah. And so the parking proposal is 187?
No, half of 2, call it rounded to 288. So half of that is 144.
144.
So Robert, I don't know if you can see this slide, but the Tory, just to come full circle, it's 45% of the units are 2s and 3 beds. And it's, you can see our matrix here, but it gives you all this specific data. I
see it. I just want to acknowledge that and thank you guys for that. Because usually we see, usually it's the opposite. So hold on, I'm just looking. I'll take a look and give you some feedback. So yeah, would you guys be able to sponsor any like e-bike vouchers and have like significant bike parking structure that's like in the building? I'm sure you have thought of it. I'm just.
Oh yeah, you must have missed the last meeting or two. We have very, very robust above ground, obviously, bike facilities in each building. And in terms of e-bike type subsidies, I think that's an excellent idea that we can take under consideration as we form our TDM plan.
Yep.
To formally present, but there are a lot of tools, and that could be one to just incentivize people from even applying for those passes for the on-street parking.
Yep. Okay. I mean, I look forward to this development. I feel like you're a trailblazer, Robert, in as much as like you took lemons and you made lemonade and you made a project that we can start to point to and say, our 20% inclusionary isn't going to get us to our goal of 20% overall affordability. And so that's why we really need projects like yours. And
that's the most exciting part of this whole process for me has been that expression, making lemonade out of lemons.
Yeah.
When we went underground there and hit the lemons, so to speak.
Yeah.
I was so deflated, but when I look at where we're at now, I mean, it's remarkable the attributes this project brings, compared to the original particularly in the affordability and also on the sustainability side by offering a car-free development, albeit with the ability to get those on-street passes. But
Yep.
I think it's remarkable that, you know, we really turned it around.
Yep.
And kudos to Beacon Communities for stepping in and helping us do that.
Oh, wow. Okay. Oh, I didn't realize that partnership.
Oh, yeah.
Oh.
This is a joint venture with them taking the affordable building.
Okay.
It's
Oh,
a
that's
joint
wonderful.
venture and execution, but we'll each
Yes.
own our own separate building.
Yep.
And Tori, I would just add to that, I think Beacon has done a great job of pushing us on the sustainability components that you heard today, as they've also, you know, they've really been leaders in the affordable, in our opinion, the affordable space as it relates to sustainability. So it's been a great partnership, and we're excited that, you know, it's led us to them as this Lemonade story continues to evolve.
Yeah. Well, sustainability justice, you know, green space justice, that's really important. And I appreciate, I just appreciate what you guys are doing. It's a development that I'm going to point to and say, you know, Mark Development and Beacon did this, and this is a creative solution to get to more affordability, sustainability, and the green space that we're going to be collaborating on. It would be lovely to have that your neighbors. I forget their last name. I think it's an Italian name or Portuguese who own the spirit store. It'd be lovely if somehow that. How about I would love to see a rendering that would show potentially if that property was ever acquired, how it might work into the larger plan. I don't know if you guys have thought about that at all, or if they have thought about it. But that, I mean, you know, with their permission and or you know, I don't know if they'd be want to do that, but that would be a fun, interesting activity to see, just because we do want to make it as cohesive if they ever choose to sell. So
I think that would be an interesting exercise. For me, I would imagine, you know, it's more for public benefit than it is for increased density. So, you know, maybe a small structure, retail in nature,
to
give the street edge, and then just improve upon the green space package beyond that.
Yeah.
You could, a lot of nice things going through my mind that you could do with that lot.
Okay. Well, I'm glad you're thinking of it, and but no pressure, of course, to the owners of that lot. Okay, that's it. I'm glad to see everybody. My name is Tori Antonino, by the way. I'm a co-chair of the Urban Forestry Committee, and you know, as you get further along, we'd love to have you come to the committee, because you know, you guys are probably going to be working closely with the Public Space and Urban Forestry Division of the city, and that's like part of the city. They get, you know, they get the big bucks, and so we're a volunteer committee, like the Energy Use and Climate Change Commission. So yeah, we'd love to come see you or have you come see us. Anyway, thanks everybody. Have a good night. I'll talk soon.
Bye, Tori.
Thanks, Tori. We are, just want to note for everyone, we are past 7 o'clock, which is really our goal to be wrapped up. Just want to make sure, in case we missed any other members of the public for tonight, we'll do one last call. All right, I am seeing none. So any last notes or thoughts from our members of the committee after hearing what Tori had to say before we close for the evening? Okay, thank you all again, and I apologize that we are over by just a little bit. Once we get We will aim for our next meeting to have, I will send you all those notes with those highlighted sections of the Winter Hill Urban Renewal Plan, so you can start absorbing what all those details that we read through fairly quickly today are. And Nick and I are going to work on a draft letter based on the notes we took tonight. We're also going to look back at the notes from all of our other meetings and see if we can pull things. I mean, way back at the beginning, there were some really good thoughts that picked up. I know we had a couple comments about, during construction, things like that. We want to sort of capture all of that in one place. So we will see if we can get that ready for you all to have with a little bit of time to review, so we can have a really fruitful conversation in September around what that letter can look like as it goes forward.
Rachel, could you just confirm the date of our next meeting, please?
Absolutely. So we are next on in 4 weeks. It's going to be the second Thursday of September. So that puts us at September 8th.
Great, thank you.
Just after Labor Day. And we'll see if we can wrap this up that night. Again, as we talked about last time, the goal is to really get these letters together, get them off to both the SRA and then to the ZBA, which can either be the same or slightly different, and then wrap up this phase of our conversations, because as this project moves into permitting, we want to let that play out and make sure that any comments that come from you all or also from the members of the public who've been attending these sessions goes directly to the ZBA, since the ZBA is going to be where those decisions get made. So hopefully September will be a great conversation, and we'll see if we need October, but hopefully that'll do it for this part.
Look forward to it. Enjoy the rest of the summer, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Good seeing you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks all. Have a great evening.
All right, thanks.